Welcome to Art Talk Music. My guest today is Mr. Mel Minter. Mel has been an active member of the New Mexico scene for as long as I've been around, and as we get into the story of how he got into music journalism, reviewing albums, and being so involved with music as his life's work, it was profound to connect with someone who I've always known and just appreciated. And to know the deep love and connection that he has with the beautiful city of New Orleans has inspired me for so long to form my own relationship with the city. We get into that as well as so many other awesome things within this podcast with Mr. Mel Minter. I appreciate him coming on and sharing his story, talking about his website as well, Musically Speaking, which you can go check out right now in the description notes of this episode. As always, I appreciate you listening, and I encourage you to subscribe if you're listening on iTunes. Come back for more and check out some of the other episodes. For now, please help me welcome this incredible journalist, this incredible human being, and this gem that we have in the musical community, Mr. Mel Minter. We are live with Mr. Mel Minter. What's going on, Mr. Mel Minter? Thank you for being on Art Talk Music.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for reaching out.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, man. I love the opportunity to hang with you, and not just hang with you, but kind of dig into a little bit of the story of who Mel Minter is, how you ended up in New Mexico if you're not from here originally, and kind of what you're up to nowadays, man. So
okay, I'll be interested to find out.
So tell me a little bit about you. I mean, obviously you're, in my opinion, probably the premier writer in town for, us in the jazz and the music community in general. But how'd you get your start in writing? Let's start there.
Well, I got a job out of college working in a publishing house in New York. Learned how to copy edit. Mm-hmm. And basically, from there, it was just connections. So I started doing some work, some editorial work for some corporate people because they paid a lot better than publishers, like 3 or 4 or 5 times better than publishers per hour spent. And from there, somebody said, "Hey, you're editing this? Why don't you just write it?" And that's how that got started. So that's how the income producing part of my writing life got started.
Yes.
With music, I had a friend in New York, Marty Lipp, who was working for one of the papers back east, and he and I had talked about music a lot and just yammering about music, and he knew I was interested in writing about it. So he put me in touch with a guy whose name I'm not going to be able to remember. It's too long ago. But the name of the website was SonicNet.
Yeah.
And I contacted this guy with Marty's recommendation, and he sent me an album to review. It was a Larry Goldings album.
Ooh.
And I wrote the review, and he said, "Great, here's another one. Review this." So that's how I got started writing about music. And SonicNet actually paid well, so of course they went out of business pretty quickly.
All good things come to an end.
Yeah, but that was how I got started. And,
wow.
And then some way or another, recommendations or whatnot, started writing for a couple of local publications here. Crosswinds, I think, was the first, no longer around. The Alibi. which is still around. Albuquerque The Magazine, and Albuquerque The Magazine, which I've been doing for like 12 or 13 years now, the monthly column.
Yeah.
I think was Tom Goralnik. Tom's got his hands in so many things,
right?
But he recommended me because I had interviewed him for SonicNet for a piece on SonicNet.
Wow. Awesome.
And he liked that piece, and he recommended me, and they called, and I said, okay.
That's beautiful, man.
So that's how that started. And I think 2006 or so, 2007, I got really tired of writing for other people and having to deal with their schedules. Mm-hmm. Like paper comes out every week. You got to be on time. And it was too much like work. So I decided to put a website up. Musically speaking, melminter.com. And now I can write about what I want to write about, when I want to write about it, how long or short I want to write about it. And I can make all the mistakes I want to make. I don't have someone looking over my shoulder.
Yeah.
Though actually Melissa, my wife Melissa, is my in-house proofreader. So she takes care of that.
That's awesome.
So that's how the website came to be. I just decided, I want to do it, on my own time, and how I want to do it, and not be held to someone else's editorial standards.
Right. And tell me about, because I know you've always had an issue, kind of a pushback with your editors and that kind of aspect. I mean, I remember you did a piece on me back in 2009, maybe 2010. It was a long time ago, and I remember you even mentioned to me, I was like, man, thank you so much for the article. I absolutely love it. You were like, oh, thanks, man. I'm a little upset that the editor kind of changed the wording of some of the ways that I had written some of this stuff.
Well, but editors and writers,
that's a relationship, right?
It is a relationship, and some relationships are very good, and some, which I won't go into with any detail,
yes.
are not good at all.
Yes.
And I mean, I've had editors. I'll mention one, Laura Marek, who used to be at the Alibi, used to be the music editor there many years ago. She was great. She always had great suggestions. She always, managed to keep me from making a fool of myself.
Yeah.
Great to work with someone like that, who's also as interested in what you're writing about as you are. And then there are other editors who just didn't help. Actually sometimes made things worse. And if you have a good editor, that's a great thing. That's a really good relationship, a good thing to have. It's someone who's got your back, essentially.
And who else has got your back besides your better half, right?
Yeah, exactly. So she manages to keep me from making a complete idiot of myself, and she's great because Melissa is into music.
Yeah, she's as passionate, I think, about you or as music as you are.
Yeah, but she doesn't have a strong musical background. So if I say something that a general reader is not going to get, she'll say, "What the hell does this mean?"
Great.
So it's good because I'm writing for general readers. I'm not writing for musicians.
Right.
I couldn't write for musicians because I don't have that kind of education. So I'm writing for general readers, and if Melissa gets it, then I know that
you're speaking to a larger audience.
The people will the general audience will get it.
Yeah. So when did Musically Speaking begin?
It's a good question. I want to say 2013. I'd have to double check that, but I think it's 2013.
I loved seeing when you did that initially because it showed taking your expression into your own hands,
Yeah, and I mean, there's good and bad about that,
Sure, without a doubt.
There are traps you can fall into, and there are ruts you can get into, and that's something actually that I've been thinking about lately. That I have, kind of developed an approach and a style that's worked for me, and I'm kind of getting to the point where maybe I need to change things up a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's nice to it's nice to be able to do what I want to do, though, when I want to do it and how I want to do it.
That's what I'm talking about.
You know?
The power of being your own boss.
Yeah.
You know, which is kind of what you know, because I've known you many years. You know, we've been, as you wrote in an article about me one time, hobnobbing in the back of the Outpost. You know, but I've known you for many, many, many years, and so to see the progression of working with the Alibi and the magazine to then, you know, eventually doing your own thing with Musically Speaking was inspiring, because it's like, yeah, man. I mean, nowadays I'm doing that more so with the art thing and the music, because now I don't have a boss. Thank goodness, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just got people who are my mentors and who help me out. But so you've had it going strong now for. I mean, Musically Speaking is, in my opinion, also a tremendous review in town. You know, it's a serious review, not just for upcoming concerts and stuff, but also of releases.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something I still use in my press release for the release of my very first album, and it's something exciting. All right, so let's kind of go back a little further. Tell me about early life, Mel Minter.
Early life. Grew up in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Among my earliest memories are singing Purple People Eater or Chantilly Lace on the bus to school.
Huh.
Do you know those songs?
No, I don't.
Oh, man. Chantilly Lace had a pretty face and a ponytail hanging down, a wiggle in her walk and a giggle in her talk. Lord made the world go round. Chantilly Lace, it was a big bopper. It was the name of the cat that did that. And Purple People Eater was a novelty tune that everybody was singing. I went to a boys' school, same school, grades 1 through 12.
Yes.
Very preppy. I was not very preppy. It's funny. I was in a rock and roll band, a garage band.
What instrument were you playing?
I was the lead singer.
Yes. I love him. Okay. Get it.
And it's funny, the last year of high school, this is 1968.
Okay.
And I in that summer before senior year, I went out to the school, talked to the headmaster. I said, look, we got a record contract. Wow. And I need to look the part.
Wow.
And because I would grow my hair out every summer, and then I'd have to cut it all off in September to go to school.
Yes.
And I said, so I really need to look the part for this. And he said, okay. So I was the least preppy looking guy in the school in 1967, 68. But that band was a great experience for me. I really loved doing that. That was a lot of fun. We made a lot of money.
Wow.
It helped finance my college education.
So tell me, all right, so let's break that down a little bit, because I didn't even know that about you. So you were singing out of high school and y'all got a record contract. What did that record contract look like? How old were you at that point? 18? 19?
16, 17.
Wow.
Somewhere in there, 18, Do you
remember what the record company was called?
No, it was a local company.
Okay.
And it was a guy who was into electronic music, which in 1968 was like, what the hell is that?
Wow.
And what he wanted to do was combine his electronic music with our rock and roll.
Whoa.
And so actually I should be more accurate. It wasn't a record contract. It was an agreement with this guy, and he was going to go get the record contract.
Got you.
Okay. Which we never got.
Well, got you.
But he did get it in front of some important people in New York. I remember Holtzman at Elektra Records, his comment was that the lead singer was flat.
That
was a kind of a heartbreaker. But so we played, in what they called the Delmarva area, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. We're based in Baltimore, where all of us lived.
All those states are really close by, right?
It's crazy. Yeah. So it's
like
90. No, it's not even 90. It's like 55 miles from Baltimore. It's like Santa Fe and Albuquerque.
Yeah, it's like Santa Fe, Albuquerque,
Baltimore
Las Cruces. It's like
that. Oh, Las Cruces. I mean, that's it's not even that far. So it's
all
pretty
those
small.
states. You know what I mean? They're all within like a couple hours.
Oh, easy. Yeah. So we could play Southern Pennsylvania, Delaware, Northern Virginia,
I
Maryland.
very much so wanted to do that, and I plan on doing it, at some point in my life, because it's so much more like Europe in that sense, as opposed to out here in the Southwest where all of our states are,
like
hours and hours and hours apart.
Right.
It takes at least about 10 to 13 hours in general to go from the tip of Texas to the end of Texas.
Yeah.
From New Mexico, it's about somewhere within the vicinity of 4 to 7 hours.
Yeah.
So it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't just make that tour happen as easily,
No, you can't.
unless you really like the road. But so, all right. So where did you go to school? There in Baltimore?
Well, high school, undergrad was in Baltimore, just outside of Baltimore.
Okay.
Place called St. Paul's.
Guessing you went to school for writing or English or something like that?
Standard math, English, science,
the
history.
basics,
Studied Spanish. Had a great Spanish teacher.
¿Todavía hablas?
Huh?
¿Todavía hablas?
Un poquito. So
Okay.
he taught us how to read Spanish.
Beautiful.
Because we had to take SATs, so it's not going to do any good to speak Spanish.
You got to be able to understand.
So
on the page.
at one point, I read Spanish like I read English.
Wow.
It's a long time ago now,
Wow.
so my Spanish reading is pretty weak. But, standard high school stuff. And then I went to St. John's College, which has two campuses, one in Annapolis, Maryland, which is the original campus, and one in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Wow.
So I did my first 2 years in Annapolis, decided I really wasn't comfortable at that campus. It was a little too conservative. The weather sucked, and it was too close to home. And I thought that, is there a chance to see another part of the country I had no clue about? So I came out here and did my last 2 years in Santa Fe.
Huh.
And it took me about 24 hours to fall madly in love with New Mexico.
1970s.
This would have been, September 1970.
Wow.
And boy, was it different out here then. Santa Fe was, I think, 25,000 people.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I always like to say if you needed toothpaste, you went down to the plaza because that's where the shops were. Now, if you need toothpaste, you got to get in your car.
Wasn't there though, right?
What?
The 5 and dime wasn't there.
Oh no, the 5 and dime was still very much there.
Wow.
Oh yeah, you go in and get Frito pie at 5 and dime.
That's my jam right there. Yes, sir.
But I mean, there were, it was a different place. It was a quieter place.
What were some of the musicians in town? Because I know Uncle Mike didn't make it till like 1980. Do you remember?
At the time, I was not listening to music. I was into theater.
Oh, wow.
And there were, which happened by accident or by mistake, depending on how you look at it.
Was there a girl involved or what?
No, not at the time, not initially. There were a lot of theater refugees in Santa Fe in those years. People from like the open theater, from really kind of cutting edge theater who burned themselves out or got burned out or got tired of it or whatever. And they all somehow ended up out here.
Wow.
So there were some very interesting theater people, and there was a really good community theater. There still is a community theater in Santa Fe. I had no idea what the quality is. But in those days, it was very high because there were some really intense theater people.
Yeah.
So that's what I got into up in Santa Fe outside of school. And I worked at a place called Three Cities of Spain, which is at the corner of Canyon and Montesol, which is now where, Geronimo is, that building.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Three Cities of Spain was a hangout for writers, artists, arts people in general. It was run by two guys, Bob and Dave, who were East Coast refugees, supporters of the arts, theater people. If you wanted good espresso, if you wanted good green chili stew, Three Cities was the place to go. They had, on the weekends, they had a movie club where they'd show all these art movies. They had like 60 millimeter projector so they'd be changing reels and filling up your coffee cup between reels. And it was a great place. It was a really fabulous place. And for me, it was kind of my first contact really with the arts world, with arts people of different sorts, writers and painters and theater people, who I, growing up had no contact with, had really no clue these people even existed, if in a way. So Three Cities was a real education and a beautiful place.
So writing and expression and all of that, I mean, is that somewhere in your family line, or is that just kind of something that really was just birthed from your experiences, you think?
I think in a way it came, in a way it's in the family line. My father was a tremendous reader, and kind of he and my mom both, but particularly my dad instilled in me an appetite for the printed word.
Yeah.
Going to St. John's just kind of deepened that, because the program there it's all reading, and it's all reading original sources. So I don't really know where the impulse to write comes from, but I've always seemed to have had it to one degree or another.
Right. I don't know everyone. I would hope that most people would want to express themselves to some capacity, but then to really kind of take it and make it your expression, your actual, livelihood eventually,
Yeah. Things happen in life.
Yeah.
I didn't start out looking to be a writer. Yeah. When I got out of college, I was just looking for work. But what I wanted to do at the time was I wanted to be an actor.
Wow.
And so that's, where my energies were in those days. And spent, a number of years. So we're talking from 72 to about 87, pursuing an acting career to one degree or another. But for most of those years, very focused on that. I was on the cusp of a successful career a couple of times, but things just didn't pan out in that way for me. And after 15 years or so of chasing that, it's like, maybe it's time to
maybe this isn't it.
Try something else.
Yeah.
And that's when I fell back on my editorial training. I had gotten out of college. And that's when the writing really took off. And the writing I was doing at the time was, purely either technical writing or like marketing stuff. But the marketing writing transferred, that style of writing kind of transferred easily to writing about music.
Yeah.
Because what I'm interested in writing about music, my primary objective is to turn people on to stuff that I think is good.
Totally.
I don't really have much interest in writing about stuff I don't like, because I don't have enough time to write about the stuff I do like. Why do I want to spend time writing about stuff I don't like?
That's fair. Yeah.
And I really want people to be as excited about something that excites me as I am.
Right.
So that's really my objective in writing about music. And so that kind of marketing background didn't hurt.
So beyond marketing and beyond editorial work, that love for music and that love for... Was that passion always there? Was there music in your family? How...
My parents listened to a lot of music.
Okay.
They were into the big bands.
Yeah, so you got jazz through them.
Dorsey and Glenn Miller and, all those folks in the house all the time.
Right.
And Armstrong. But I always come back to a quote. I read this quote from Ellington. I wish I knew where I read it. so I could go back and find it and write it down exactly as he said it. But he said something to the effect that there are people who are born to play music, and there are people who are born to listen to music. And what he meant in the context, you could take that a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But what he meant in the context was there are people who are as compelled to listen to music as musicians are compelled to play it. And I definitely am in that category. I am compelled to listen. I am highly susceptible to music. I don't know where that comes from. I've always been that way.
Yeah.
You put something on, my feet start moving.
Yeah, of course.
You
start
know,
reacting.
I don't play. I don't feel compelled to play. I've fumbled around with different instruments, and it's been educational.
Totally.
But you know, it's not something that I feel a need to do. But listening, you know, I need to do that, and for whatever reason, I think I like to figure out. Why is this? How is this affecting me? What's going on here? Or what is it that makes this music live for me? And what does it bring out? And try to communicate that to a reading audience.
Yeah.
And you know, in the past I've likened it, that kind of writing, to it's kind of like travel writing. You go someplace you've never been before.
Yes.
What do you see, hear, smell, taste? It's the same way with music. You go somewhere you've never been before.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what did you experience? What did it mean for you? And how did it change your thinking or your feeling? And so where that need comes from, I have no idea. But that's been there for a long time. And we used to have sessions in New York. Friday nights was boys' night out. And we'd get together. We'd adjust our attitudes a little bit. And we'd typically go to an Indian restaurant on East 5th. I think there was a whole row of Indian restaurants. We used to joke that they all had the same kitchen. But there must have been 15 restaurants on that street. And we, get something to eat. Then we go back to one apartment or another, 3 or 4 of us, hang out, listen to music all night.
Wow.
And schmooze about anything, but mostly about whatever we were listening to. And so that's just kind of carried over. That's what I do in my music writing. It's essentially the same thing, except solo now. I don't have 3 or 4 people to bounce it off of.
So speak to me about this rough transition from taking something you absolutely love and then making it your livelihood. Because a lot of people kind of, I remember the transition of leaving school and getting into becoming a quote unquote full-time musician, whatever that was. And people would talk to me about the reality that, well, I try not to make a living doing what I love because then eventually I don't love it. Because things get hard, or beyond things getting hard, then maybe someday you feel like it's more work than it is what you love. Because the idea for me of doing what you love means that you're not working a day in your life, and I don't know if that's a philosophy you've carried through your life, because obviously for your life in writing, you have this relationship, which we spoke to and hinted at a little earlier about the writer and the editorial relationship,
Right.
But speak to that a little bit in your experience of coming into writing, and if you ever felt that sense of, it became more work than doing what you loved.
Well, occasionally you get that feeling.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter in some ways what I'm writing about. The challenges are the same, whether I'm writing a brochure for a corporate client or writing a review. The challenges are pretty much the same. Writing about music is a lot more personal, and in some ways easier and harder than writing something for a client, for a corporate client.
Yes.
I think, it's the corporate work that really pays the bills here. And sometimes, doing that work, clients can be a real pain. you know, but that's their privilege. So, you know, sometimes that feels more like work, for sure, than writing about music. But music writing doesn't really ever feel like work. Even with the magazine, which has it's a column every month, 2 pieces I need to do every month. But I enjoy hearing this new music. I enjoy meeting the people who make it and finding out what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, where they're coming from. So it's a constant, that interest is constantly renewed month after month, even though, you know, it's a schedule, there's an editor involved, but you know, frankly, they leave me pretty much alone at the magazine. They're very good about that.
Yeah.
But you know, it's fresh every month. And to steal a line from Noah Martinez, it's a fresh apple every year. So every month it's a fresh apple. Noah is part of Lone Pinon, the duo Lone Pinon.
Noah is great, the bassist, right?
Oh yeah, and
he's tremendous.
Yeah, those guys. I just interviewed them. They're going to be in the
I
May
missed their
issue.
CD release party at the Outpost. I know they just had that. Right?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
They're very interesting, both those guys.
Now, it certainly seems like beyond writing and finding a way to fall in love with it every single time you do it, and realizing the newness of every project you take on. It seems, would you agree that you're falling more in love with the process?
It's funny. I don't know. Not sure how to answer that.
I'm saying, of course, the process in the effort every time of re-listening to people's music, of finding the joy in their music, and finding the joy in every single, you know, corporate project that comes in your way, and, you know, working through those challenges as they come in and finding joy in that, as opposed to the end result of what your product is.
Oh, well, the end result is almost an afterthought.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
Because it's really the process that's what it's about. If, you know, on the other hand, if I write a good sentence, a good sentence, that makes me extremely happy, very gratifying.
It's like writing a great line in a song or something.
You know, if I can capture something that even I don't know that I know, that's, you know, I live for that. You know, that's you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and getting that line that comes out of nowhere.
Yes.
You know, and so the process, I mean, writing about music in particular, I have to listen to music in a different way in order to write about it. You know, I really have to focus on it. I have to sit down. I have to put all distractions aside.
Yeah.
To place myself in the right place in the room.
Yes.
So I get the benefit of the stereo speakers, and I have to I drop into it, and it's almost like a meditation. And that for me, it's a very selfish thing. I mean, people say, well, thanks for listening. Well, you know, thank you for making it, because I got to listen to it, man.
Yes.
You know, I get great pleasure out of that. I mean, I listened to Catherine Russell last night, her new album, Alone Together. Oh, my God. I mean, I couldn't go to bed. It kept me up for several hours. I was just, I mean, I love it. You know, but I don't know that, you know, if I wasn't going to write about something, that I would have that kind of focus on a piece of music. I mean, it still would affect me, but to be able to kind of drop into that, I mean, that's kind of a benefit,
Sure.
you know, for me.
Sure.
And hopefully that benefit translates to people who read what I write. that's the objective anyway.
That's the goal. Yeah. Now, have you, in your so many years of writing, and specifically, of course, we're talking about writing music, because hopefully you're not going to be writing a bad review or a bad article or thing for a corporate job, but have you ever written a bad review? I mean, how do you approach something that you don't vibe with and that you don't like, or that, because I know that's a thing that musicians deal with writers, and I know you're not the typical writer or music critic, But.
Yeah, I'm more an enthusiast than a critic.
Right.
I've had awkward situations. I mean,
you don't have to name anyone in particular.
No, I won't. But I mean, early on, I wrote reviews about things that, just the first one we were talking about earlier, I think before we got on the mics, writing about, what is his name? Goldings. Voodoo.
Larry Goldings,
Voodoo something. I can't remember the name of the album. Didn't particularly do a whole lot for me, and I said that and explained why. But as I said earlier, I much prefer to write about things that I like. And when I get stuff, the hardest thing for me is to get something from someone who I like, whose music I like, and then not like what they've given me.
That's what I want to know. Has that happened to where you turn down a review, or not even turn down, but still write the review, but have to kind of, push through it?
It's happened, and I've turned down reviews.
Okay.
And all I can say to the person is, this doesn't speak to me. And I can't write about it if it doesn't speak to me.
Yeah. How could you make someone else enthusiastic about it if you're not? That's the title as well of your entire series that we're talking about here, musically speaking. Yeah.
So, and there was one interesting, there's things happen in different ways. There was an album put out by Meredith Wilder and Christina Jacobson.
Ooh, I love Meredith Wilder. She's a badass.
Yeah. What's not to love?
What's not to love? Yeah, seriously.
But they did an EP. I think it's 4 or 5 songs. I don't remember now. And when I first listened to it, I was like, man, I'm not getting it. And it's worried me because I really like both these people and their music. And listening to it, I thought, what am I going to do? Because it's just not speaking to me. But and I don't want to disappoint them. And I don't want to write a bad review. There's no point of me doing that, given my focus. And then oddly enough, one day, after I'd listened to it 2 or 3 times, and once very closely, I just took it with me in the car, and I put it in the car, and suddenly, it's like, oh, I get it. Suddenly I heard it.
That's beautiful.
And I think if it was somebody I didn't know, I wouldn't have spent that time with it. I wouldn't have tried to figure out what's happening here.
Right.
And there were some things I could point to that I thought got in the way of the music. I think I said 1 or 2 things in the review about that. But finally, I thought I heard what they were doing, and
yes.
I get it now.
Yeah.
And then I could hear it differently. So it happens in different ways. But if I get something that I don't like, I just have to be honest. Say, this just doesn't work for me. And, I've got one now that someone I know sent me, who will remain unnamed, I was looking forward to with great expectations. And, it just doesn't grab me. So I got to tell them.
Yep.
And I just, I have to be honest and just let them know that maybe the next one.
Yes.
So that's like the worst part of what I do.
Right. So moving into some other aspects of music writing, you obviously talked about your love for jazz coming from the big band era and hearing that from your parents and stuff. But tell me, jumping over from musical, what were you going to say? Sorry,
I can tell you exactly how I got into jazz.
Okay, all right.
It was kind of a three-step process.
Okay.
First process was I was 16 years old, and I went to a buddy's house. My girlfriend and I. He was several years older than us. He actually had his own apartment, and we're still living with our parents at age 16. And he said, "Check this out." And he pulled out this LP. It was John Coltrane Quartet live at the Village Vanguard.
Wow.
And he put that on, and it blew my mind. I just couldn't listen to that enough.
Wow.
Now, I'm a little white kid from the suburbs. I really knew nothing about jazz. I knew nothing about jazz history. I had no clue about any of it. This was like out of the blue. So I listened to this record like it was the only jazz record that existed, as far as I knew.
Yeah.
I listened and listened and listened. And then one day I got really brave and I went to the record store and I said, "Give me the most far-out John Coltrane record you have." And they gave me Ascension. And I took it home and I put that on and I had no clue what was going on. And so my jazz listening stopped for a while.
From that to Ascension is a big jump for those of you who know John Coltrane's body of work.
You get an idea of how clueless I was. And about a year, maybe 2 years later, I went to, they had a jazz festival in Maryland, the Laurel Jazz Festival. And one night there was Herbie Mann on the same bill with Thelonious Monk.
Wow.
And I never heard of Thelonious Monk, but I had heard of Herbie Mann because he was getting some airplay on AM radio. And so we went, and Monk knocked me out. I thought, wow, this guy's great. Who is this cat? But that kind of just faded. So now we're going to fast forward to, I was probably in my early 30s or so. I was tending bar in New York, one of my many straight jobs while pursuing, the theatrical thing.
Yeah.
And the head bartender, Anthony, I can't remember Anthony's last name, sweet guy, was a huge jazz fan. And he knew I was into music. I was listening to either rock and roll or classical music at the time. But he couldn't understand why I didn't listen to jazz. He said, "Okay, I want you to do me a favor." He said, "I want you to go to Tower Records, and I want you to buy Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. Yeah. I want you to listen to that and then report back." So I did. Oh my God. That was it.
Which is a record, by the way, I recommend to everybody. And I bought for my sister on her birthday, by the way. She likes jazz because that's who. All right, sorry.
Yeah, I mean and I do the same thing with anybody who's interested. What about jazz? Here, listen to this.
Check this out. Yeah,
because it is so accessible and so deep. Oh my God! It's
one of those albums that you listen to over and over again, and every time you hear it, you find more profundity within it.
Oh,
you fall in love with it more.
It's limitless. It's eternal. It's unbelievable. And that was it. I mean, hearing that, so I just started checking different things out, and it just grew from there. And I think, in terms of really, really getting into it, I guess there's a fourth stage. Because when I was writing for SonicNet, I think it was SonicNet at the time that I did this with. It was a couple years before Armstrong's 100th birthday. And I said, look, there's going to be just a slew of releases, and half of them are going to be crap.
Yeah.
Or just repackaged stuff, and people aren't going to know. Well, let's do, the top 10 that you need to have. And they say, "Oh, great idea. Let's do that." So I spent like a year doing nothing but listening to Armstrong and reading about Armstrong. And that did it. I mean, if I wasn't already hooked, I was hooked and sunk. And I mean, I was...
Satchmo did the job.
Oh, my God. That man. If I could spend an hour with any human being, alive or dead, it would be him.
That'd be Louie. Yeah. Wow.
It would be him. But that began a little deeper investigation into the history of the music, and did a lot more reading. and wider listening. I really didn't know anything about Armstrong at the time. I remembered him from Ed Sullivan when I was a child, and my memories weren't particularly favorable.
Yeah.
But I did know that he was an icon. That was about the extent of my understanding at the time. And then I discovered he was, I don't know. I think he came from a star. I think he came down here to help us. It brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the man was, I don't know what to call it. I went to his 100th birthday in New Orleans.
Wow.
Which was a great weekend, long weekend. And gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of the man. This is terrible. Famous jazz historian. Used to run the Rutgers jazz archive. Oh God, I can't believe I'm blanking on this man's name. Well, in any event, his name will come to me, I hope, in a moment. But I said to him, we were standing outside the Mint building in New Orleans. There was a concert going on. And I said, I get the impression that Armstrong was sent here. There's this thing in Eastern religions about avatars, or people who choose to come back to the wheel of birth and death in order to pass on their knowledge. And I said, that's who I think Armstrong is. And he looked at me and he said, a lot of us feel that way. Deep human being.
They say, I remember it was one of my favorite quotes from Mr. Mark Tatum over at the University of New Mexico's jazz history class that he teaches, was that Louie Armstrong was the gift that we gave to the world. And, at one point, his song, Hey Dolly, beat out the Beatles, on the Billboard charts.
Yeah.
And he was like, wait, which song? Wait, which song of mine did it? I didn't even know. And it's so beautiful. It speaks to his nature. It speaks to his spirit that he also was the kind of person who kept the same home when he became famous in the same neighborhood. Yeah. Why? Because people in the neighborhood knew him and knew that was Satchmo's house, and they protected it.
Yeah.
And that's just such a beautiful idea of a man, and shows just a tiny little glimpse of the incredible person and icon that he was.
I heard one story about him. Then maybe taking up too much time on this, but
no.
But oh Lord, this is what happens when you get to be my age. Clarinetist in the All Stars, starts with an S. Can't think of his name. He's just passed away not that long ago. He was telling a story. They were doing a recording session late at night up around 57th Street somewhere in New York. It was a Saturday night, Sunday morning. And they got out real early Sunday morning. It was like 7 a.m. And Armstrong walked down 8th Avenue or 7th Avenue or Broadway, one of those avenues. And Joe Moragni is the name of the guy, the clarinetist. And he decided to shadow him just to check out what Armstrong was doing that morning. And Armstrong walked all the way down to 33rd Street to catch the 7 train to go out to Queens. And at the top of the stairs, there was this little white kid selling Sunday newspaper. And Armstrong stopped and started talking to this kid. And Moragni said, the kid kind of backed up a little bit, like, who is this cat? And after a while, they got engaged in quite a conversation. Mm-hmm. And after a few moments, Armstrong reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of bills and handed it to the kid and took a paper and went down to the subway. Now, first of all, here's maybe the greatest musician of the 20th century taking the subway home.
Yep.
Secondly, the story is that every day when he went out, he put a pile of money in one pocket and a pile of money in the other pocket. And one pocket was for his needs that day, and the other pocket was to give away.
That's beautiful.
I mean, that's
gorgeous. Yeah.
that's a man.
I'm glad that the airport was named after him,
Yeah, no kidding.
He's like, I talk about being an international, gift.
Yeah.
That's seriously what he was,
Yes, he was.
Now, you have a deep connection with New Orleans. I know we're speaking about Louie Armstrong, but we, throughout the years, have spoken quite a bit about New Orleans, as well as, had some wonderful experiences. I know that you used to go there every jazz, jazz fest.
We did 20-some jazz fests. I don't think I could live in New Orleans because, just for starters, the weather would kill me.
Mm-hmm. That summer.
But, it's the first city that I ever experienced that, not that there aren't others or parts of cities, but the first place I ever experienced that was ruled by an African culture. And it was eye-opening. And when we first went there, the city was in a lot of trouble. This would have been the early 90s, and the drug issue was probably still not great, but it was awful then.
Yeah.
And it was a very dangerous city at the time. But it is a city that is so rich in culture and history, such a deep, deep place. We got to know people there. We became kind of part of the family of a local family who we would spend time with every year when we went down there. We're still close to them. Learned a great deal about the history of the city, in particular the history of the African people in the city. It's for all of the ugliness there, it is a deeply beautiful place and spiritual place. And America would be a much poorer country without it.
Yes.
There's another Ellington quote, and I'm not going to get it exact either, but he said, thank goodness for slavery, because without it, we wouldn't have these things that we have. And slavery, there's no excuse for it or excusing it. But the contribution of the African population to this country is so deep and so rich, and without it, we would be so boring and white.
Seriously.
I'm sorry. I hope I don't offend too many people with that. But, not to say there isn't beautiful European culture, because there is.
Sure.
But New Orleans was that blending,
True melting pot, totally.
And something very unique and special came out of it. And if only we could carry that over into other spheres of our lives.
Very much so. That's beautifully put, So, another question that I, before kind of my final question and kind of moving towards the end of this episode, was talking about some books that really had an impact on your life, throughout your life. And it could be within music writing, or it could be within just whatever, fiction, nonfiction, whatever.
Well, there are a number of them. Proust comes to mind first, which I didn't read until I was in my 30s, I guess, and it took me a year to read it.
What is that? Proust? Is that the name
Remembrance
of the book?
of Things Past, or In Search of Time Lost is the literal translation. Books about memory, 100 Years of Solitude.
Oh yeah, Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Another I'm reading. I just started reading that again for the third or fourth time now.
What about in Spanish, man?
I don't know. That would be a mountain for me now.
It's incredibly challenging in Spanish. Yeah.
It's pretty challenging in English.
I can't read that in Spanish. Yeah.
But I do things with books the same way I do with music. I get, I find something that I like, and then I just dive into it. So, I spent...
So you're that way with authors and stuff? So
yeah,
you find
like 2 years with Kafka. I think I read the trial like 15 times
Wow.
in the space of 4 or 5 years. Read everything, letters,
Metamorphosis,
anything.
yeah.
Metamorphosis, number of times. I mean, anything I could get my hands on that related to Kafka.
Yeah, yeah.
Same with Thomas Mann, same with Proust. So, yeah, I think those names are probably the ones, the strongest ones. Not to say there aren't other writers that have been important influences, but
Sure.
I think those are the ones that really
Come to mind
resonated with
first.
me.
Yeah, sure. So, a question that I've sort of began using as a theme line, a through line through a lot of the podcasts, is a question that comes from an Art Farmer book of him talking to, kind of interviewing almost his friends who are other musicians. But it was the question of, what does jazz mean in your life?
Oh, man. Where do you start with that? Wow. Jazz is a way of living. I mean, it's cooperation, improvisation, and beauty. And you need all of those to get through the day. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that. It's a lesson, but beautiful.
So tell me a little bit about, Mel, what you're working on right now. You talked about Catherine Russell.
Oh, yeah, Catherine Russell. Well,
This is what you're working on right now with Musically Speaking, which, of course, we'll put some links within the podcast so people can check out.
Yeah, I'm going to do a piece here hopefully the next day or two on Catherine's latest release, Alone Together. Oh, man, this lady, what a singer. She makes me think of Hank Jones because with Hank Jones, you could hear the entire tradition of jazz in almost every line, but he was never limited by it. And she's the same way. You can hear the history of jazz in her singing, but she's so alive in the moment and she's so modern at the same time. She's not hampered or hindered in any way. She celebrates that tradition, but she's not bound by it. What a great singer. I don't know. I mean, her phrasing is just, I don't know who can swing a lyric like she can. And then there's a local lady who lives actually in Corrales here, not maybe a quarter mile from here, named Lara Manzanares. She's originally from up around Tierra Amarilla. Actually, her folks have a shop up there called Tierra Wools. They do a sheep-to-shawl business. They've been doing that since, I think, the early 90s or late 80s. Actually, we have 2 of their rugs that Melissa and I bought like 30 years ago, as it turns out. But Lara's a really wonderful singer-songwriter. She won the Best Album last year at the New Mexico Music Awards. And she won Best CD package because she's also a designer. And a weaver. But she has a new single coming out and on April 10th, I think. So I'm going to get a piece up about that.
Awesome.
She's going to be performing at Christina Jacobson's Songwriter Showcase on April 9th.
Yeah.
At Winning Coffee, so people can check her out there. Lovely singer. Very interesting songwriter. So those are the 2 things.
What about any past write-ups that you've done that people can check out once I put the episode or the link to your website up right now?
I think most recently the one that seemed to really resonate with people. There's I think 2, one local and one not. I did an interview with Luciana Souza.
Oh yeah.
When she was here. She has some really interesting things to say. She's a very interesting vocalist, a very interesting human being. She people seem to really get into that interview. She said some interesting stuff. We talked about her new release, and her process and her relation to poetry and so forth. And then there's another local guy, Isaac Aragon, who lives down a little south of, I think it's Los Lunas, I want to say.
That's right.
Yeah. And Isaac just put out a single, which I think is killer, and did a piece on that. So those are fairly recent that people might want to take a look at.
That's Love Bless America.
Love Bless America.
Oh, yeah, man. Yeah. I did an episode with Isaac as well.
Did you?
Yeah, I released it the week that he put that single out. He's a tremendous singer.
You should listen to that.
I will send it to you.
He's a talented songwriter, and it's beautiful horns on that from Ryan Montano.
Man, and his voice, Isaac's voice is just spectacular.
Can I tell you a story?
Tell me.
So he sent me the track.
Okay.
This is like a month or two before it was released. And I listened to it, and I just say, oh my God, this is incredible. This is beautiful. So I called up Hillary Smith, and I said, Hillary,
have you heard this guy?
You have to hear this. She said, okay. So I was out running around town when I called her, and she said, come on over. So over I went, and we tried to hook my phone up with her little speaker, and it just wouldn't link. So we ended up just putting my phone up to her ear, and her eyes just got big as saucers. As she was listening, she said, "I have to talk to this man." So I gave her his number, and they've connected, and I hope something comes out of that for either one of them or both of them.
Ooh, a show with Isaac and Hillary. Ooh.
Yeah, I think it'd be quite an evening.
They would bring the house down. Yeah,
but
twice.
I knew Hill would love it, and she did. She was as knocked out as I was. It's a beautiful song, and it's we can all learn a lesson.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah.
From that tune.
I love it. Mel, it's been such a pleasure talking to you and learning so much about you, man. I've learned quite a bit about you, and it's such a joy to sit down and talk with you. And this went by quickly. This is just an hour. I'm sure we could sit here for another 2 hours and talk more about the layers that are there with Mr. Minter. So I appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you, and thanks for coming out here.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to come to your beautiful home here in Corrales, New Mexico. And until the next time, because I definitely plan on having you back on down the road. Okay, my man?
All right.
Thank you, Mel.